Welcome to the BlueBoard podcast series for Blue Lights project. Today, I am joined by Géraldine Fauville, Associate Professor at the University of Gothenburg and affiliate at Stanford University, whose work uses immersive technologies like underwater virtual reality to transform blue education. In this episode, we explore how immersive experiences can deepen our connection to the ocean and inspire care for its future. Géraldine, welcome. First of all, I would like to thank you for being here. How is everything going? Are you okay?
Well, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Everything is fine. It's a rainy November day here in Sweden.
Well, I guess that's usual. I was in Helsinki a couple of weeks ago. It was just like that. Well, I would like to start with Géraldine. You have been doing some amazing work with underwater VR, something I assume many people probably haven't even heard of.
Right.
Before we dive into that, I would love to start with your personal story. What first sparked your connection to the ocean, and how did that early fascination perhaps shape the path you're on today?
Yeah. So that's a question that I regularly have, and unfortunately, I don't have a super inspiring story. I am from Belgium, so we have 60 kilometers of coast. It's one long sandy beach. I used to spend a lot of time there during summer, but I don't really know why. I've always had this fascination for the ocean. So when I was a kid, for birthdays or holidays, I would always ask to receive books about the ocean. And I had this collection of beautiful books with like this amazing photos of different sea creature, and I would spend hours studying the content of these books. And then as I grew up, I realized that I could study marine biology. And then from that moment, that was my goal.
I feel like when we talk about ocean literacy or blue education, we don't often talk about the emotional side of it, but rather just talk about facts, numbers, and data. Your work really highlights the emotional side of ocean literacy and blue education. When I was a kid, I don't think I had inspiring teachers or immersive tools. We just memorized facts about the ocean and moved on. So I'm curious, why are feelings like wonder and perhaps empathy are so powerful in motivating people to actually care for the ocean?
Yeah. So early work in environmental psychology and environmental education thought that the moment you give people environmental information and knowledge, that would translate into environmental behavior. And then as the research evolved, they realized that it's not the case. It's much more complex. And information in itself doesn't really trigger pro-environmental behavior. It's much more efficient to try to have people interact with nature. We've seen that people who spend more time in nature tend to have more what we call nature connectedness. So you feel like your identity is connected to nature. And that translates into pro-environmental behavior. And that nature connectedness has that cognitive and that affective components. And we suspect that there is a similar mechanism when it comes to ocean. Although the ocean is often inaccessible, it's not easy for everyone to actually spend time on the coast, either because you live far away or just because you don't have the mean to go there. So we need to find other ways to help people connect with the ocean.
Yeah, and I have so many questions about what you just said, but let's perhaps start with this term double immersion. This underwater VR that you're working on offers double immersion. So we're not just talking about a regular VR, but we are talking about something both visual and physical. What does this embodied experience in your opinion and in your experience, unlock that traditional VR cannot?
Yeah. So the traditional VR, just to make sure everyone is on the same page, you put this VR like headset on and you are completely immersed visually in a different world. And if you turn your head, what you see changes depending on where you look at, the same way as it does in the physical world. But this time you completely separate it from the physical world that you would normally see. And this is in itself a very powerful tool because it creates what we call presence. So when you put the headset on, your brain treats what you see as if it was reality. So it means that people will have behavioral, psychological, and emotional reaction that they would have if it was a real activity, but it's not. So we're interested in using that for immersing people in the ocean. However, something that's important is that we have not only the view to see the world or to experience the world. There is also the auditory, but also everything we perceive with our body. So let's imagine that you put a VR headset on and you see yourself being underwater. Well, you see it, you might hear the sound of the water, but you still feel that you are grounded. You feel like gravity, you feel your feet on the ground. So there is some kind of a sensory disconnect. So your brain cannot treat it like completely like an ocean experience because the feel on your body is not what you expect from an ocean experience. So that's why we're so interested in underwater virtual reality. And that's what we call double immersion. Because with underwater virtual reality, you have the VR headset on. In this case, it's a waterproof one. And your whole body is in water. You are floating in a pool. And suddenly, all the sensory inputs that you are receiving aligns to make your brain believe that you are having an ocean experience.
But that also sounds a bit scary, though. I mean, just putting the VR headset and going in the pool, I guess someone is also helping and assisting them while they have this experience, right?
Yes. So I've been doing that since 2019 with hundreds of participants, and I've seen like a wide range of reactions. So you totally right. This is an equipment that people are not familiar with. You also have a snorkel for you to breathe during the experience. So we take quite a significant amount of time to make sure that each participant feel comfortable with the equipment before we start the activity.
Yeah, you talked about accessibility. I think that's one of the most important points. Personally, I don't think I ever seen a coral reef. The only diving I have done was in pool, and that doesn't count, I guess. And I know a lot of people are in the same situation and may never get the chance to dive or visit coral reefs, probably. So I'm wondering, can underwater VR help democratize access to the ocean and perhaps reduce ocean inequity?
Yes, this is one of the aspect that we are interested in as you describe. So not everyone has access to the ocean, but many more people have access to a swimming pool, and especially in country where you have swimming lessons as part of formal education. We believe this is like a very important ways to give a remote, like to give a virtual access to the ocean.
This system is also very expensive, right? Like, let's say on an individual level, you need a VR set, you need a snorkel, you need probably a trainer or someone there to assist you, and you need the right place. Perhaps you need to commute students to actually to somewhere else from their school and everything. In an estimation, what is the cost and how do you basically fund this project?
Yeah. So for the moment, the equipment is indeed pretty expensive and it requires, as you mentioned, staff and a pool and so on. We are in the early stage of the research concerning underwater VR. So what we want to figure out now is it even a tool that could play a role in increasing ocean literacy. So I totally agree with you. In the future, we're going to need to find ways to make this tool much more accessible.
We talked about emotional connection, and I have no doubt that every, let's say, person who experienced this underwater VR experience would feel much more closer emotionally. He or she will be more close to the ocean. But how do we actually translate this emotional connection into long-term engagement? Because people tend to forget, right? I mean, people can have that experience and can have some feelings, but then everything can be different in just in a couple of weeks. So how do we make sure that this emotional connection translates into behavior change?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So first of all, we've run a study that just got published that touched upon that point. So the study was a collaboration with researcher from Stanford University and the University of Gothenburg, and was led by Anais Voshki, who's a PhD student at the Dorr School of Sustainability at Stanford. And in that study, we compared the impact of underwater VR with VR and computer. So we had participants who had watched the same videos, but in different media. So computer, VR, or underwater VR. And we asked them a bunch of questions before and after to measure some parameters like emotion. But also what we did is each participant would receive a certain amount of money for their participation to the experiment. And at the end, after they were exposed to one of the conditions, we asked them if they were willing to give a portion of their compensation to a beach cleaning organization. And we realized that participants who were in the underwater VR condition gave significantly more of their contribution to this organization. So what we showed in this study is that underwater VR can actually move the needle when it comes to pro-environmental behavior. And going back to your question on the long-term impact, well, for the moment, our study did not show any long-term impact. So generally, we could, send another survey to the participant a month after the experiment. And in that case, we do not see differences in between treatments. And that kind of makes sense. Like the activity, the underwater VR activity lasts for 10 minutes. So we cannot really expect it to have a long-term impact. So the next piece of the puzzle that we need to solve is look at how can we combine underwater VR with, other learning material to have a long-lasting effect.
You said you have been doing this since 2019, right? Diving with other people. And I'm sure that you have witnessed powerful human reactions underwater, like from fear to wonder, I assume, because I would be scared. I know that. Can you share a moment from your work, perhaps, that made you think, this is why I do this? Like, this is the reason, this is one of the best examples that I can give to someone else.
Yes. So as we talked earlier about, it takes a while for some people to get used to the equipment. So I had people who came in the pool really not sure if they wanted to do that. They told me, I've never used a snorkel. I'm scared. And of course, they always have the option to just leave the pool. But quite often, they tend to be curious and they want to try. And so we would take like a significant amount of time to make sure the breathing works, and then they could put their head underwater, and then they would ask me to hold their hand during the activity, or they would just be standing on the pool with the headset on, and then very slowly they would start swimming. So I've seen this amazing transformation from someone who arrives pretty scared of the activity, telling me I'm not super comfortable in water. And then when they finish the activity, like they jump and they scream and they're super proud of themselves and they are just amazed by what they've seen underwater. So I really love this kind of like stories where people go from one end of the spectrum to the other and really enjoy their time with us.
Now, about this technology, can it really, maybe it's a rhetorical question, but can it really replace what we have today in Blue education? Like, can it replace the teacher? Can it replace a book, a textbook, or a live beach activity, which we just talked that not everyone has the accessibility? What do you think?
Well, I think digital technologies in any form should never replace a real nature experience. Going to the ocean, going on the beach should always be activity number one. That's like research showed that this is like the best way to help people feel connected to nature and want to protect it. However, there are all those barriers. The ocean is remote for many people, but also a lot of what happens underwater or all the pollution, a lot of it is invisible. And you want to make it visible to people so that it goes from an abstract concept to something concrete. They feel that they can change. And that's where underwater VR or any technology can actually be a complement. So it's not about replacing teachers or book or anything. It's just having one more tool in our toolbox to increase ocean literacy.
Now, I want us to look at the future. What emerging methods or tools in Blue education, just like underwater VR, excite you most? Like, where do you see the future in? Like, maybe perhaps I read something about underwater drones. What do you think? And why do you think that will be the most exciting thing in the future?
One of the technologies I'm the most curious and interested about for the moment would be augmented reality. So we've talked a bit about the cost of VR in general. It's expensive. It's one person at a time. So I'm really interested in how we can take a very different path with technology and use the equipment that most of people have, which means their phone. How could we use augmented reality so that anyone can transform their room into an aquarium anytime they want? So I'm really interested in that kind of question for the future.
That is crazy. Well, I would love to really see that happening. My last question, because it's also the topic of the next episode, the citizenship in Blue education. Personally, how do you integrate the idea of citizenship, which can mean responsibility, action, care for the ocean, into your Blue education programs? Just to give a heads up to our listeners for the next episode.
Yeah, I think for the moment, we are focusing on the impact of the tool itself, either VR or underwater VR. But I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done around how you scaffold this activity. What do you offer the learners before and after to make sure that it's not just the fun activities for a few minutes, but it actually, you turn it into something meaningful that people can keep with them long after, and maybe, for example, have discussion after this kind of activities on what role we play in the problem of the ocean and ocean literacy. How can we personally and as a community contribute to removing some of this problem?
Who produces this equipment when we talk about underwater VR?
So we've worked with this company called Ballast Technologies. They are based in San Francisco. And in 2019, we've met with their team, like Stephen Greenwood, their co-founder and CEO, who've helped us test the equipment. And since then, we've been collaborating with them during our studies.
Thank you, Géraldine. That was my conversation with Géraldine Fauville, a true innovator in Blue education and immersive technologies. Her work reminds us that connecting emotionally with the ocean can inspire real action, and that technology, when used thoughtfully, can help us bring the ocean closer to those who may never have a chance to experience it firsthand. Thank you for listening.